It was 1948. The world had just breathed a sigh of relief. World War II was over, the Axis powers had been defeated, and the United States was consolidating itself as the undisputed industrial titan of the planet. American men were returning from the front lines, their pockets full of back pay, eager to start families, buy homes, and most importantly, drive cars. But if you walked into a Ford, Chevrolet, or Chrysler dealership in 1946 or 1947, you were in for a disappointment. You would see the same reheated fenders and the same pre-war engineering that had been shelved since 1941. The big three were lazy. They knew you would buy anything they put in stock because you had no choice. Then, from Ypsilanti, Michigan, came a bang that shook the boardrooms of Detroit. It wasn't just a car, it was a declaration of war against the status quo. It looked like a rocket, drove like a race car, and promised to keep your family safer than any other vehicle on the road. It was the Tucker 48. But this isn't just the story of a car. It's the story of ambition, of a man named Preston Tucker who dared to dream too big, and of the ruthless machine of politics and industry that swallowed him up and spat him out. Was it fraud? Or was it an assassination of American ingenuity? I'm going to present you with 13 shocking facts about the car they tried to destroy. Welcome to the story of the Tucker Torpedo. Welcome to the channel, and don't forget to like and subscribe to learn more true stories from the automotive industry. Now, let's get to today's facts. Fact 1. The Tin Goose and the myth of the reverse gear. To understand the Tucker, you have to separate the dream from the reality. And nowhere is that line blurrier than with the first prototype. Enthusiasts call it the Tin Goose. When Preston Tucker first announced his car, he promised the world the moon. He promised a torque converter transmission at both ends of the engine. He promised a massive 589 cubic inch engine with hydraulic valve lifters. The reality of the Tin Goose, however, was a mechanical nightmare. This prototype was built by hand, literally hammered out of metal sheets. It was heavy, it was cumbersome, and the engine was a beast that refused to run quietly. But the most famous story, the one you've likely heard whispered at car shows, is true. On the day of the grand premiere in Chicago, June 19, 1947, thousands of people packed the auditorium. The Tin Goose was huge and loud. But there was a problem. The suspension arms had snapped under the car's weight the night before. The crew had welded them back together just hours prior. More embarrassingly, the specialized hydraulic drive system didn't have a reverse gear. That's right, the car of the future could only go forward. To keep the fluid from leaking and the car from stalling, they kept the engine running loudly off-stage to mask the noise of the valve train. When they pushed it onto the stage, the crowd went wild, unaware that the vehicle they were cheering for was technically incapable of backing out of a driveway. This wasn't malice on Tucker's part. It was the chaotic reality of rushing a concept to stage. But this single event planted the seed in the media's mind. Is this car real, or is it a prop? Fact 2. The heart of a helicopter. The Franklin 0335. The Tin Goose's 589 engine was a failure. It produced no power and too much noise. With production looming and investors getting nervous, Preston Tucker made a pivot that remains one of the most fascinating engineering audible calls in history. He looked to the sky. Tucker found a company called Air-Cooled Motors, which was manufacturing engines for the Bell 47 helicopter. These were the Franklin 0335 engines, flat 6 configurations, air-cooled, rugged, and incredibly torquey. Tucker realized that with some modification, this could be the power plant for his car. But he didn't just buy the engines. In typical Preston Tucker fashion, he bought the entire company. His engineers took this helicopter engine and converted it from air-cooled to water-cooled. This was no small feat. They added water jackets to the cylinders, a radiator, and modified the intake. The result was staggering. While the new 1948 Cadillac V8 was producing about 150 horsepower, the Tucker's 335 cubic inch flat six was churning out 166 horsepower and a massive 372 pound-feet of torque. This engine was virtually indestructible. In testing, they ran it at full throttle for 150 hours straight, the equivalent of driving full speed from Detroit to San Francisco and back again. When they tore the engine down, it showed negligible wear. It was an engine built for the air, grounded for the highway, providing performance that the Detroit establishment simply couldn't match. Fact 3. The Cyclops Eye. If you see a Tucker coming down the road, you know it instantly. It has a face, and right in the center of that face is the Cyclops Eye. This third headlight wasn't just a styling gimmick, it was a safety feature. The center light was connected to the steering linkage. When you turned the steering wheel more than 10 degrees to the left or right, the light would swivel, illuminating the curve you were about to enter. Think about the roads of 1948. Interstate highways didn't exist yet. You were driving on unlit, two-lane country blacktops. Seeing around a dark corner wasn't a luxury. It was a matter of life and death. However, this innovation hit a bureaucratic wall. At the time, 17 states had laws on the books dating back to the horse and buggy era that strictly defined how many lights a vehicle could have. A third, moving headlight, was technically illegal in many jurisdictions. Tucker had to fabricate a special cover plate for the center light to sell the car in those states, essentially blinding the Cyclops to satisfy the law. It is a classic example of legislation lagging behind innovation, a theme that would plague the Tucker Corporation until the very end. Fact 4. The Safety Chamber. In the 1940s, automotive safety was an oxymoron. Dashboards were made of stamped steel. Knobs and switches were sharp and protruding. If you got into an accident, the car might survive, but you likely wouldn't. Preston Tucker was obsessed with safety. He wanted to build a car you could walk away from. This led to the design of what he called the safety chamber. Look at the passenger side of a Tucker 48. There is no glove box. Instead, there is a spacious open area below the dashboard. In the event of an imminent crash, the passenger was instructed to dive into this footwell, which was protected by the steel frame and the engine in the rear. Furthermore, the dashboard itself was padded, a first for a production car. The knobs were recessed behind the steering wheel so they wouldn't impale the driver. Even the windshield was designed with pop-out safety glass. In a collision, the glass was designed to eject outward rather than shattering inward into the occupants' faces. The Big Three mocked these features. They argued that talking about safety frightened customers because it reminded them of accidents. Tucker argued that ignoring safety was criminal. History, of course, proved Tucker right. Fact 5. Aerodynamics and the 0.27 drag coefficient. The design of the Tucker 48 wasn't just about looking futuristic. It was about cheating the wind. Preston Tucker hired Alex Tremulous, a brilliant designer who had worked on aircraft concepts. Tremulous gave the car its distinctive fastback shape, the fenders that flowed away from the body, and the low stance. The result was a drag coefficient that is still impressive today. Tremulous claimed the Tucker 48 had a drag coefficient of roughly 0.27. To put that in perspective, a Toyota Prius, a modern car designed entirely around aerodynamics, has a drag coefficient of about 0.25. A standard car in 1948 was pushing air like a brick wall. This aerodynamic efficiency, combined with the helicopter engine, meant the Tucker was fast. Very fast. It had a claimed top speed of 120 miles per hour. During testing at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, one of the test cars reportedly blew a tire at 100 miles per hour. The car didn't flip. It didn't spin. The center of gravity was so low and the aerodynamics so stable that the driver simply coasted to a stop. Fact 6. The transmission trouble. We have to be objective here. The Tucker 48 was not perfect. Its Achilles heel was the transmission. Tucker originally wanted a Tucker-matic transmission, a continuously variable transmission that was decades ahead of its time. But it was too complex and couldn't be manufactured in time for production. Scrambling for a solution to mate with the rear-mounted helicopter engine, the engineers sourced transmissions from the pre-war Cord 810 and 812. These were front-wheel drive cars, so the transmission had to be modified to work in the rear-engine Tucker. The Cord transmission was a pre-selector gearbox. It was fragile. It wasn't designed to handle the massive torque of the Franklin helicopter engine. In the early production cars, teeth were stripped off gears, and the shifting mechanism was notoriously difficult. Eventually, Tucker's engineers, led by the brilliant Eddie Offutt, created a distinct version called the Y1 transmission, which solved many of these issues. But the bad press from the early transmission failures had already done its damage. It fed the narrative that the car was a lemon, even as they were fixing the problem in real time. Fact 7. Torse-elastic suspension. If you look underneath a 1948 Ford or Chevy, you'll see leaf springs, technology that dates back to horse-drawn carriages. If you look under a Tucker, you see something completely different. The Tucker utilized a torse-elastic suspension system. Instead of steel springs, it used rubber torsion bars. The suspension arms were fused to a steel tube inside a rubber cylinder. As the wheel moved up and down, it twisted the rubber. This provided an independent suspension for all four wheels, which was incredibly rare for an American car of that size. The result was a ride quality that was described as floating. It absorbed the potholes of post-war America with grace, while the independent action kept the tires planted firmly on the road. It was complex to manufacture, but it proved that Tucker wasn't just slapping parts together. He was rethinking how a car should interact with the road. Fact 8. The accessories program, the beginning of the end. Here is where the story shifts from engineering to finance and where the dream began to unravel. Developing a car company from scratch is expensive, astronomically expensive. By 1948, Tucker was burning through cash. The banks, pressured by the establishment, were reluctant to lend him more. He needed liquidity to keep the factory lights on. So, he launched the accessories program. He told prospective buyers that if they wanted to be at the top of the waiting list for a car, they should buy the accessories now. People bought Tucker radios, Tucker luggage, and Tucker seat covers for a car that they didn't yet own. From a business standpoint, it was a desperate move to raise capital. From a regulatory standpoint, it looked like a Ponzi scheme. This program raised about $2 million, but it also raised the eyebrows of the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. It gave his enemies the ammunition they needed to argue that he was selling promises he couldn't keep. Fact 9. The Big Three and the Senator. This is the most controversial part of the Tucker legend. Was there a conspiracy? Historians point to Senator Homer Ferguson of Michigan. Ferguson was a powerful man, closely aligned with the interests of the Big Three automakers in Detroit. The success of an upstart like Tucker, based in Chicago, was a direct threat to his constituents and his donors. Ferguson headed the investigation into the Tucker Corporation. It is widely believed that he used his political influence to pressure the SEC to launch a full-scale investigation and, crucially, to leak the details of that investigation to the press. A secret report was leaked to a prominent columnist, claiming that the Tucker car was a fraud, that it couldn't back up, and that the money was being embezzled. The report was devastating. Stock prices plummeted. Dealers canceled orders. The factory was raided by the FBI. The tragedy is that at the exact moment the FBI was seizing the records, the factory was finally figuring out the production line. They were building cars. But the government essentially locked the doors. Fact 10. The trial and acquittal. The trial of Preston Tucker began in October 1949. He and 7 of his executives were charged with mail fraud and violations of SEC regulations. If convicted, they faced massive prison sentences. The government's case was that the car was a myth, that Tucker never intended to build it, and that he just wanted to take the money and run. They brought in witness after witness. But then, the defense took a risky strategy. They rested without calling a single witness. Tucker's lawyer, William Kirby, realized that the government's own witnesses had actually proven that Tucker did try to build the car. They had shown receipts for steel, for engines, for factory tooling. You don't buy an entire helicopter engine company if you're planning a scam. The jury saw through the smoke. On January 22, 1950, they returned a verdict: not guilty on all counts. Preston Tucker was a free man, but it was a hollow victory. The company was bankrupt. The factory was gone, eventually taken over by Ford. The reputation of the car was in tatters. He had won the legal battle, but he had lost the war. Fact 11. Finding the 51. So, how many cars did they actually build? Before the factory was shut down, the Tucker Corporation completed 50 pilot production cars. If you count the Tin Goose prototype, the total is 51. What is absolutely shocking is the survival rate. Of the 51 cars built, 47 of them still exist today. That is a survival rate of over 90%, which is unheard of in the classic car world. Usually, prototypes get scrapped, crashed, or rusted away. But the people who owned Tuckers knew they owned something special. They hid them away. They maintained them. Today, you can see them in the Smithsonian, the Peterson Automotive Museum, and the Henry Ford Museum. Interestingly, after the factory closed, there were several chassis left unfinished. Some dedicated employees actually snuck back in and finished a few more cars from the leftover parts, adding to the mystique of the final count. Fact 12. The Francis Ford Coppola connection. For decades, the Tucker was a footnote, remembered only by hardcore car geeks as a weird failure. That changed in 1988. Legendary director Francis Ford Coppola, the man behind The Godfather, was a massive Tucker enthusiast. His father had actually invested in the original Tucker stock and lost his money. Coppola wanted to tell the story. He directed Tucker, The Man and His Dream, starring Jeff Bridges. The movie is a love letter to the car. While it takes some Hollywood liberties with the timeline, it captured the spirit of the man and the machine perfectly. Coppola himself owns a Tucker. In fact, he displayed it at his winery for years. The movie single-handedly rehabilitated Preston Tucker's image. He went from being remembered as a potential con man to being celebrated as a martyred visionary. It cemented the car's legacy in the American consciousness. Fact 13. The $1 Million Club. Finally, let's talk about value. In 1948, the projected price of a Tucker was supposed to be roughly $2,250. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $30,000 today, a bargain for the technology you were getting. If you want one today, you better have deep pockets. Because of their scarcity, their history, and the Coppola movie, Tuckers are now blue-chip investments. In 2012, a Tucker 48 sold at Barrett-Jackson for $2.91 million. In subsequent auctions, they have consistently fetched between $1.5 and $2 million. It is the ultimate irony. The car that the government claimed was worthless, the car that couldn't find a bank to loan it money, is now one of the most valuable American automobiles ever produced. It is a testament to the fact that true innovation, no matter how hard you try to suppress it, eventually finds its value. The story of the 1948 Tucker Torpedo is a tragedy, but it's also an inspiration. It asks us a difficult question. What would the American automotive industry look like today if Preston Tucker had succeeded? Would we have had seatbelts 10 years earlier? Would disc brakes and fuel injection have become standard in the 1950s instead of the 70s? We will never know. The Tucker 48 stands as a monument to what if. It is a beautiful, flawed, magnificent machine that was too good for its time, and perhaps too good for the people who controlled the industry. I want to hear from you. Do you think Preston Tucker was a fraud, or was he sabotaged by the Big Three and the government? And if you've ever been lucky enough to see a Tucker in person, tell me where in the comments below. I read through them, and your stories help build this community of petrolheads. If you enjoyed this deep dive into automotive history, please do me a favor. Smash that like button. It really helps the algorithm show this video to more people like us. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next episode on the hidden history of cars. Thanks for watching, and keep the history alive.